Hey everyone, welcome back. If you enjoy calm stories that help you relax and fall asleep, make sure to subscribe and stay with me till the end. Now, take a deep breath, close your eyes, and let's begin tonight's story. The Quiet Year. There was a small cottage on the edge of a silent town, surrounded by tall grass and an old wooden fence that looked like it hadn't been painted in decades. The cottage was quiet, almost forgotten. No cars passed by. Only the sound of the wind brushing against the trees could be heard from far away. One day, a woman named Julia arrived there. She had rented the place for a few weeks, wanting to escape the noise of the city and find some peace. She brought with her a few books, a small suitcase, and her favorite tea mug. When she first stepped inside, the air smelled like old wood and dust. The furniture was simple, a little worn, but clean. There was an old clock that didn't tick anymore, and a fireplace filled with ashes from some forgotten winter. Everything seemed to stand still, as if time itself had slowed down. Julia walked through each room quietly, touching the walls, looking at the faded wallpaper, and listening to the strange silence that filled the place. There was one door she didn't open on the first day, the attic door. It was at the end of a narrow hallway, with a small brass handle and a lock that no longer worked. She looked at it for a moment, then walked away. Tomorrow, she thought. That night, she sat near the window with a cup of tea and watched the sky turn dark. The stars appeared one by one. She could hear crickets outside, and the soft creak of the house settling into the night. It was peaceful, but in a way that made her feel a little lonely too. The next morning, sunlight came through the thin curtains and filled the room with a pale golden glow. Julia made some tea, and again found herself staring at the attic door. It wasn't scary, just strangely quiet, as if it had something waiting behind it. After a few minutes, she climbed the stairs slowly. Each step made a soft sound under her feet. The attic was not locked. When she opened it, the smell of dust and wood filled the air. Inside, there was nothing much. Just a few boxes, an old chair, and a small wooden chest sitting near the far wall. She knelt beside the chest and opened it. Inside were some folded papers, a few photographs, and a thin notebook covered in brown fabric. The photographs showed a young couple standing in front of the same cottage, smiling softly. Julia turned one of them around and saw a name written in faded ink, Thomas and Agnes, 1952. The letters looked neat and careful. She opened the notebook and read the first page. It was a journal Agnes's handwriting. The words were gentle and plain. She wrote about her garden, about planting tulips near the porch, about waiting for her husband to return from work at the train station. There was nothing dramatic in the writing. Just simple life, simple days. Julia sat there for hours, reading page after page. Agnes wrote about the weather, about small dinners, about quiet evenings where she listened to the clock tick. Sometimes she wrote about missing Thomas when he had to work late. Other times, she wrote about the tulips that never bloomed, or the rain that came too late in the season. The more Julia read, the more she felt like she could see those days, slow, calm, ordinary days that passed like gentle waves. That evening Julia walked outside. The garden was overgrown, but near the fence, she saw what looked like the remains of an old flower bed. The earth was dry, the stones half buried. She knelt down and dug a little with her hands, finding what looked like a small dried bulb, maybe a tulip. She smiled faintly, thinking of Agnes. She took the bulb inside, found a clay pot in the corner of the attic, filled it with soil, and planted it. Maybe, she thought, it would grow again someday. The next few days passed quietly. Julia woke up early, read a few pages of the journal, made her tea, and sat near the window as the sun rose. The world around her moved slowly, birds singing, wind passing through the grass, the clock that still didn't tick. She began to feel like she was part of the cottage itself, living in the same rhythm Agnes once did. There was something strangely peaceful about reading the words of someone who had lived such a quiet life. No big events, no drama, just the small beauty of existing day after day. One afternoon, as she turned another page, an envelope slipped out of the journal. It was yellow with age, sealed but never opened. Julia carefully unsealed it. Inside was a short note written by Thomas. "I'll arrive tomorrow with the tulips." That was all it said. Julia read it twice, then looked around the attic. Maybe Thomas never came back. Maybe the letter was lost before Agnes ever saw it. There was no way to know. She placed the letter back inside the notebook and closed it softly. On her final evening in the cottage, Julia lit a candle in the attic and sat quietly beside the chest. The light flickered against the wooden walls, and the shadows moved gently across the floor. She thought about how many quiet lives had come and gone in this house, how many stories had faded away without anyone remembering them. She looked at the planted tulip by the window, just a small pot of soil for now, but full of hope. When morning came, she packed her things slowly. Before leaving, she returned to the attic one last time. She placed the notebook and photographs neatly back inside the chest, closed it, and whispered softly, "Thank you." Then she walked downstairs, out through the door, and into the cool morning air. As she drove away, the cottage grew smaller in her rearview mirror until it disappeared completely behind the trees. But in her mind, she could still see it. The quiet rooms, the forgotten letters, the soft sunlight falling across the dusty floor. She didn't know if the tulip would ever bloom, but she hoped it would. Some things, she thought, don't need to be exciting to matter. Some stories are meant to be quiet, just like life itself. And as she disappeared down the empty road, the cottage stood there, as it always had, silent, calm, and timeless, holding within it the memory of 2 lives, and now one more. Thank you for joining me for this quiet story. I hope it brought you a sense of peace. Sleep well, and I'll see you in the next one.